She found an unconscious man on the street, and the events that unfold in her life afterward turn this story into a drama that will grip you from beginning to end. Rain had a way of finding Ava Hart on the days she could least afford to be found. It was nearing midnight when her worn sneakers splashed through the puddles on Fairfield Street, the city's dim glow reflected in every slick surface. Her denim jacket was soaked through. She clutched it tighter anyway, as if the act alone could summon warmth. Her backpack dug into one shoulder, heavy with diner tips and 2 prescription bottles she picked up for her mother. $42 remained in her bank account. Not enough for next week's treatment. Not enough for anything. The wind cut through her as she passed the shuttered pawn shop on the corner. In its window was the reflection of a girl who looked too young to be carrying so much grief. But Ava didn't stop. She couldn't. She was used to pushing through, used to keeping her head down and her heart guarded. The last few months had made her numb, and yet, even numbness had its limits. She paused at the intersection, waiting for the light to change even though there wasn't a single car in sight. The city was hushed tonight, so silent it was almost eerie. That's when she saw it, or rather, him. A shape on the ground, unmoving, half hidden in the alley behind the pharmacy. Her breath caught. "Hello?" she called out, instinct tightening her chest. No answer. She took a hesitant step forward, her wet shoes squelching on the pavement. Her pulse thumped louder than the rain. As she got closer, the figure took form. A man, sprawled on his side, one arm curled protectively across his midsection. His face was bruised, his clothes soaked and torn. Blood trickled from his temple. His lips were pale. Ava dropped to her knees beside him, the cold instantly seeping through her jeans. "Sir, can you hear me?" A groan. His eyes fluttered just briefly, but he didn't speak. Ava's fingers trembled as she dug into her backpack, pulling out her phone. She dialed 911 and pressed the speaker to her ear, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "Yes, I need an ambulance," she said. "There's a man. He's injured, badly. I don't know what happened. He's unconscious." She rattled off the cross streets and tried to shield him from the rain with her jacket, holding it over his head as she crouched low. "I won't leave you," she whispered, unsure if he could even hear her. "Just hang on, please." The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking questions Ava barely processed. All she could do was focus on the man's face, on the long scar beneath his jaw, the stubble on his chin, the way his chest rose and fell in uneven patterns. Something about him felt familiar, but that was ridiculous. She didn't know anyone like him. A man like this, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a ruined designer coat, didn't come from her world. The ambulance siren echoed faintly in the distance, drawing closer. She held his hand. It was cold and limp in hers. "You're going to be okay," she said softly. "You have to be." When the EMTs arrived, they pulled her gently away, asking her name, her connection to the man. She said she didn't know him, that she just found him there, that she couldn't walk away. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, she caught one last glimpse of his face under the ambulance lights, and something twisted in her gut. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. But from where? The door slammed shut. The sirens wailed again, this time carrying him away. Ava stood in the rain long after the ambulance disappeared, shivering not from the cold, but from something she couldn't name. Something that had just changed everything. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and sorrow. Ava stood at the front desk of the emergency department, her wet jacket clinging to her like a second skin. The receptionist, a tired woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense tone, barely looked up. "I'm sorry," she said, typing rapidly. "Unless your family, I can't give you details. I don't even know his name, Ava replied, clutching the strap of her backpack. I just found him, on Fairfield Street. He was bleeding. I called 911. I just want to know if he's okay. The woman hesitated, then gave a faint sigh. He's stable, that's all I can say. He's being seen now. Thank you. Ava stepped back and found an empty plastic chair in the corner of the waiting room. It creaked as she sat. Her limbs ached, her throat was raw from the cold, and she hadn't eaten since early afternoon. But none of it registered. Her mind was with him, this stranger who had collapsed into her life like a forgotten story. She couldn't shake the image of his face. Even under the bruises, there had been something unsettling in the way he looked at her, if only for a moment. His eyes, hazel and haunted. A flash of recognition. A shiver had run down her spine when they made contact, like something buried inside her had stirred. She tried to convince herself it was just the adrenaline. A coincidence. The stress playing tricks on her already exhausted body. But no matter how she tried to rationalize it, the feeling lingered. She opened her phone. There were 3 missed calls from her mother's nurse, and a low battery warning blinking in the corner. She should go home. She needed to go home. But something, some instinct she couldn't explain, kept her glued to the chair. Minutes passed. Then an hour. She was half dozing when a nurse in navy scrubs approached, her badge reading Melinda. She had kind eyes, the kind that made Ava straighten. "You're the young woman who found the John Doe?" Melinda asked softly. Ava stood quickly. "Yes. Is he okay?" "He's still unconscious but stable. We treated a head wound, likely from a fall or a blow." There were signs of hypothermia. No ID, no phone. Just a crumpled business card in his coat pocket. Completely unreadable now. "Do you know him?" Ava hesitated. "No, but I couldn't just leave him there." Melinda studied her for a moment. "He's lucky you didn't. Can I see him?" The nurse looked over her shoulder toward the hallway, then back at Ava. "Just for a minute." Ava followed her down a long corridor bathed in flickering fluorescent light. The walls were lined with muffled conversations and curtain-parted rooms. Room 209 was quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors. There he was, cleaned up, but still pale. His head was bandaged, his face a canvas of bruises. His hands were motionless atop the hospital blanket. He looked both older and younger than she remembered from the alley. Vulnerable, and yet guarded. Ava stepped closer. "You don't know me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I found you, and I don't know why, but I couldn't walk away." She sat beside the bed, folding her hands in her lap. "You probably don't remember anything. I wouldn't either, after what you went through. But if you wake up and you're scared or confused, I just want you to know you weren't alone." There was no movement, no flicker of awareness. Ava stayed for another 10 minutes, watching him breathe. Before she left, she did something she hadn't expected. She reached into her backpack and took out the small silver bracelet she wore on a chain around her neck. It had belonged to her father. She placed it gently on the nightstand beside the man's bed, next to the hospital's impersonal clipboard and plastic pitcher of water. "Just so you know," she murmured, "someone out there still believes in second chances." She walked out without looking back, but behind her, the man's fingers twitched. The sun had barely risen when Nick opened his eyes. Everything was a blur of white. White ceiling, white sheets, white hot pain in his skull. A steady beep echoed beside him, syncing with the dull throb behind his temple. It took several seconds for his vision to focus, and several more for the realization to hit. He had no idea where he was, or why. He tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea forced him back against the pillows. His mouth was dry, his lips cracked. There was the faint taste of iron. His fingers clutched at the blanket instinctively. There was something missing, something he should remember. A nurse entered the room, clipboard in hand. "You're awake," she said with a warm but professional tone. "That's good news." Nick blinked at her. "Where?" "You're at St. Mary's Hospital," she said. "You were found unconscious in an alley off Fairfield Street. You've been here since last night." His brows furrowed. "Found?" "You didn't have any ID, no wallet, no phone. You were hypothermic, had a head wound and signs of physical trauma. You've been in and out of consciousness. Do you know your name?" He hesitated. The answer was there, just out of reach, like a word on the tip of the tongue. "Nick," he said finally, his voice rough. "My name is Nick." "Nick what?" He searched his mind. Nothing. I don't remember." "That's okay," the nurse said gently. "It might come back slowly. You've been through a lot." She checked his vitals, adjusted his IV, and made a few notes before leaving him with a plastic cup of ice chips and a promise that a doctor would come by soon. Nick stared at the ceiling. He had a name, but it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. He had fragments, a house, a glass in his hand, a woman yelling, city lights, and then the rain, the cold, the sound of a voice, soft, kind, a woman. He closed his eyes and saw her again. Not clearly, just a shape. But her presence clung to his memory like static. She had been there when everything went dark. Her voice had been the anchor in the chaos. Who was she? And why did the name Ava surface like a whisper in his mind? When the doctor arrived, he confirmed what Nick had feared. There was no ID, no memory of recent events, and no one had come looking for him. A possible concussion. Temporary memory loss. And for now, no answers. "We'll keep you under observation," the doctor said. "But if you remember anything at all, let us know." Nick nodded, though his mind was already elsewhere. Later that day, after drifting in and out of sleep, he woke to a nurse delivering a small object found near his bed. "It's not yours," she said. "But the young woman who brought you in left it here. We thought you might want to see it." She placed the silver bracelet in his hand. Nick stared at it. The letters on the back, RH, meant nothing to him. But the metal was warm, as if it still held the memory of someone else's hand. The moment he touched it, something stirred. A flash. A girl in a red dress. Laughter. A man lifting a child into the air. A porch swing. Then darkness again. He gripped the bracelet tighter, breathing hard. Who was this woman? And why did she feel like someone he should never have forgotten? Ava stirred her mother's soup as the kettle whistled in the background. She hadn't been able to sleep since leaving the hospital. Her shoes were still damp from the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's face again, bruised, lifeless, yet strangely familiar. Something about him pulled at her, like a dream she couldn't wake from. "Sweetheart," her mother called from the couch, her voice fragile, breathy. "You didn't come home last night." Ava placed the bowl gently on a tray and walked it over, kneeling beside her. "I stayed at the hospital. There was a man lying in the street. I found him. He could have died, Mom." Her mother looked at her with concern. "That's awful. Is he okay?" "He's alive. I don't know much more than that." Ava hesitated, searching her mother's eyes for any sign of recognition. "There was something about him. I can't explain it." "You've always had a soft heart," her mother said with a faint smile. "Even when you were little, you never let anything suffer alone." Ava brushed a damp curl from her forehead and sat beside the couch. you remember when I was 5 and I found that injured bird in the yard? I stayed up all night feeding it with a dropper. You cried when it flew away. Because I thought it wouldn't need me anymore." Her mother's hand found hers. "Maybe some people come into our lives not because they need us, but because we need them." The words lingered in Ava's chest long after her mother drifted off to sleep. That afternoon, she returned to the hospital. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe the ache of something unsaid. But when she arrived, room 209 was no longer quiet. He was awake. She stopped in the doorway, unsure whether to enter. He sat upright, staring out the window, his hands clasped loosely in his lap. The bandages on his forehead were fresh, his expression unreadable. Then he turned, and their eyes met. "You're her," he said, voice gravelly. "From the alley." She stepped inside slowly. "Yeah, I'm Ava." He nodded, as if the name confirmed something for him. "Nick, I think." "You think?" "I'm not sure of anything right now." Ava crossed her arms. "Do you remember what happened?" "Only pieces. Rain, lights, your voice." He held up the silver bracelet. "You left this." "It belonged to my dad," she said quietly. "I guess I thought you shouldn't be alone." He studied her, his eyes narrowing. "Why would you help a stranger?" "I don't know. Maybe because I've been one." The silence between them was weighty, but not uncomfortable. There was an unspoken understanding, two broken people, suspended in the space between what was and what might be. Nick broke the silence. "You seem familiar." Ava looked away. "Funny. I thought the same about you." Neither said anything more, but in the quiet that followed, something passed between them, unspoken but undeniable. A sense that they were not beginning something new, but slowly rediscovering something long lost. And as Ava turned to leave, Nick called out softly, "Come back tomorrow?" She paused in the doorway, then nodded. "I will." The next morning, Ava arrived with a small paper bag and a cup of coffee. Nick was sitting up in bed when she entered, already dressed in a plain hospital-issued t-shirt. His color had improved, and there was a little more life in his eyes, but he still looked like a man on the edge of something fragile. "I didn't bring flowers," Ava said, holding up the bag. "But I did bring a blueberry muffin, not hospital grade." Nick offered the faintest smile. "That's better than flowers." She sat in the chair beside him as he unwrapped the muffin, watching him carefully. Every movement he made, every glance, stirred a strange unease inside her, something rooted in familiarity that refused to take shape. "So," he said after a few bites, "you know my name, kind of, but I still don't know who I am." Ava leaned back. "Nothing's come back. Just flashes, sounds, smells. I keep seeing a house, gray shutters, a porch swing, and I remember a woman's voice, angry, yelling. I don't know if it's real or a dream." "What about your last name?" He shook his head. "It's like trying to remember a word in a language I don't speak anymore." Ava hesitated, then pulled something from her pocket. It was an old photo, creased in the corners, worn from years in a drawer. A family picture. Her father, smiling proudly. Her mother, younger and radiant. And in the center, a boy, barely 3 years old. "I've never shown this to anyone outside my family," she said. "That's my older brother. He disappeared when I was a baby." Nick's hand trembled as he took the photo. "The story goes," she continued softly, "we were on a trip. My brother wandered off at a rest stop. My parents looked everywhere. The police launched a search, but he was gone. Vanished. Just gone." Nick stared at the photo. His eyes locked onto the boy's face, round cheeks, curly hair, a bright innocence frozen in time. His own hand went to his cheek, as if trying to trace the shape of a memory. "I've never met him," Ava whispered. "But I've always wondered if he was out there, alive, lost." Scared. Nick looked up, pale. "You think I might be him?" "I don't know," Ava said truthfully. "It's probably crazy, but I couldn't stop thinking about it after I found you. The timing, the scar under your jaw. He had one too. Fell on a sprinkler when he was little." Nick reached up, touching the faint scar under his chin. "I have no idea who I am," he said. "But I look at that picture, and something in me cracks open." They sat in silence, the photo resting between them. Ava spoke again, her voice low. "Even if you're not him, I think we were meant to find each other." Nick didn't answer. But later, after Ava left, he sat with the photo in his hands long into the night. The little boy stared back at him from another life, one he couldn't remember, but one that was beginning to feel dangerously close. And as the rain began to fall outside the hospital window, Nick whispered to no one, "Why do I feel like I've known her forever?" Nick was discharged with nowhere to go, no memory to guide him, and no name that meant anything beyond the syllable on his wristband. Nick. Possible head trauma, memory loss. The hospital offered to place him in a shelter, but Ava wouldn't hear of it. "You're coming with me," she said simply. He protested, of course, but when he saw her mother, frail, wrapped in blankets on their modest living room couch, smiling with eyes full of quiet wisdom, he stopped arguing. Ava had prepared the tiny guest room, mostly used for storage and old books. She cleared the shelves, changed the sheets, and found him clothes from a donation box she never had the heart to throw away. "You didn't have to do all this," he said that night, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed tightly across his chest. Ava shrugged. "You would have done the same." He wasn't so sure about that, but something told him she was right. That evening, Ava sat at the kitchen table, sorting through old photos and unopened mail. Her mom had gone to bed early. The oxygen machine hissed softly down the hall. Nick sat across from her, sipping tea, studying the photo she had shown him before. The one of the little boy. "She called him Jamie, right?" he asked. "Yes, James Hart. But my parents always called him Jamie. And no one ever found out what happened?" Ava shook her head. "No leads, no ransom, no body. My dad never forgave himself. My mom, she stopped talking about it." Nick tapped the table gently. "What if I'm not him? Then you're still the man I found in the rain, and you matter either way." He stared at her. "How do you keep caring like this, after everything you've been through?" Ava smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think when you've lost as much as I have, it's easier to see what matters. People matter." He looked down. "And what if I'm someone terrible? What if I did something awful, and that's why I can't remember?" Ava reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Then you still saved someone the night you survived. You gave me something to believe in." Nick didn't know how to respond, but her words stayed with him long after the lights went out. The next morning, Ava pulled a dusty box from the attic. Inside were old VHS tapes, letters, photographs, pieces of a family before the fracture. She handed him a handful of photos. "Maybe something will spark something," she said. He flipped through them one by one. A beach trip, a picnic, a little boy with missing front teeth, riding on his father's shoulders. Then his hand froze. One photo, a birthday party, 4 candles on the cake. And in the corner, hanging on the wall, was a large wooden clock, oak frame, Roman numerals, a jagged crack across the face. Nick's pulse spiked. That clock. He knew that clock. "I've seen this," he murmured. "That clock, I've seen it before. In my dreams. Ava looked at him wide-eyed. Are you sure? I used to hear it ticking. Loud. Too loud. He closed his eyes. Suddenly it was there. A flash of memory. A boy running down a hallway. The tick-tick-tick of the broken clock. A voice shouting in the background. Then a door slamming. And silence. Nick opened his eyes, trembling. I think something happened in that house. Ava sat beside him, her voice barely a whisper. You remember? Not all of it, but enough to know it wasn't just a disappearance. Someone made me disappear. The weight of Nick's words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Someone made me disappear. Ava froze. Her mind reeled. Her instincts told her to press for more, but she held back. She had learned from her mother's silences that forcing a memory could shatter it completely. Nick's hands trembled slightly as he leaned forward, elbows on the kitchen table. The clock. I remember it. I remember hiding under it once. My mom, someone, was screaming. Not at me. At a man. Your father? I don't know. Maybe. The voices were muffled. I remember footsteps. And someone grabbing my hand and saying, Don't look back. He paused, his jaw tightening. That's all I can see right now. Ava reached across the table and placed a hand on his arm. It's okay. That's something. That's more than we had yesterday. Nick looked at her with gratitude, but it was tinged with fear. What if I don't want to remember the rest? Ava didn't have an answer. She'd often wondered the same about her brother, whether the mystery had been easier than the truth. Later that afternoon, while Nick rested, Ava went to the closet where her father had stored everything related to Jamie's disappearance. She hadn't opened that box since she was 12. It was dusty, sealed with aging tape, and carried the weight of grief like a scent. Inside were police reports, news clippings, flyers with a little boy's smile staring out at the world that failed to find him. She found a note her mother had once written to herself, a quiet prayer, never meant to be read. Please let him remember us, even if we don't remember how to go on. Ava closed the box slowly. That night, after dinner, she found Nick in the living room, staring blankly at the turned-off television. I want to go back, he said. She frowned. Back where? To that house, to wherever that clock was. I think if I see it again, I'll know. Ava hesitated. But we don't know where it is. I do, he said, standing slowly. I just remembered the street name, Redwood Lane. Ava's heart stopped. Redwood Lane was where her parents had lived before she was born, where Jamie had vanished. Are you sure? She asked. Nick nodded. It's blurry, but I remember a swing on the porch. I remember the number on the door. 36. Ava felt dizzy. That house was sold 20 years ago. Someone else lives there now. Then we ask. We explain. I need to see it, Ava. I need to stand where it happened. The next morning, Ava made a call to the current owners of 36 Redwood Lane. She explained enough to sound credible, even if the full truth still lived in shadows. Surprisingly, the couple agreed to let them visit. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the clouds, Ava and Nick stood before the faded blue house that held more secrets than paint. The porch creaked under their feet. Nick looked at the door with a strange reverence, like it might breathe or speak. When they entered, the air felt heavy, as if the walls still remembered everything. And then, in the hallway, he saw it. The clock. Unmoved, still cracked, still ticking. Nick took a step forward, and everything broke open. Screams. A fight. The sound of a chair crashing. A man shouting, "Get him out! Take him now!" A woman sobbing. Nick, then Jamie, crying. hands pulling him down a back hallway, a voice whispering, "This is the only way to keep you safe." Then darkness. A strange car, new faces, a new name. Nick fell to his knees. Ava knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders as he whispered through tears. "It wasn't an accident. They made me disappear. They thought they were protecting me, but they never brought me back." Ava held him tighter, her own tears falling freely now. "You're back now, Jamie. You came home." And for the first time in 25 years, James' heart wept for the childhood he lost, and the family he never truly left behind. Jamie. The name echoed in Nick's, no, Jamie's mind like a bell tolling in a long-forgotten church. For so long, his identity had been a blank canvas smeared with fear and confusion. Now, one name had cracked it wide open. He sat in the passenger seat of Ava's car on the drive home, staring out the window in silence. The fall trees blurred into streaks of red and gold. But he didn't see them. He was still inside that house. Still hearing the voices, still feeling the tug on his wrist as someone, his mother, a stranger, had dragged him away from the only world he'd known. Ava glanced over, her hands tight on the steering wheel. "You haven't said anything since we left." He didn't respond right away. I feel like the last 25 years were stolen from me, and I don't even know who to blame." Ava kept her eyes on the road. Maybe it wasn't about blame. Maybe someone thought they were doing the right thing, keeping you safe. Jamie laughed bitterly. "Then why didn't they bring me home? Why didn't anyone come for me?" Ava's voice was gentle. "They never stopped looking. You were all my parents talked about when I was a kid. You were the ache in every silence, the reason the house never felt whole." He turned to her, his throat tight. "Then why don't I remember them? Maybe you locked it away to survive." They drove the rest of the way in silence. When they reached her house, Ava's mother was asleep, her soft breathing the only sound in the living room. Jamie walked into the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He touched his face. He didn't see a millionaire or a lost boy. He saw a man unrooted, carrying a history that didn't belong entirely to him, and yet was undeniably his. Later that night, Ava joined him with a worn folder in her hands. "I thought you should see this." Inside were copies of police reports, therapist notes, and news clippings from when Jamie went missing. She handed him a photograph of their parents on the night before the trip. "I think this was the last photo they took together before you disappeared." Jamie studied it carefully. His father's arms were wrapped protectively around their mother. Both of them were smiling, but there was tension in their eyes. And then there, peeking out from behind his mother's skirt, him, a child with wide eyes, clutching a toy airplane. Something shifted inside his chest. "Was I happy?" he asked. Ava didn't hesitate. "You were loved. That's all I know." He closed the folder, then looked at her. "Why are you doing this for me?" "Because you're my brother," she said softly. "And because I've spent my whole life feeling like part of me was missing. I think maybe you felt the same." He didn't answer, but his eyes softened. The next morning, Jamie sat outside on the porch, watching the sky shift from pink to gold. A bird landed on the railing beside him, chirping before darting away. For the first time, he felt the strange flutter of belonging. Ava stepped outside, a cup of coffee in hand. "I made an appointment," she said, "with a trauma specialist. Someone who can help piece together what happened after you were taken." Jamie nodded. "Good. I want to know. I want to remember." She smiled gently. "We'll remember together." Then, with a steady voice that made him catch his breath, she added, "Welcome home, Jamie." He didn't cry, but in that quiet morning light, He felt the first true warmth of something returning, something that felt a lot like family. The therapist's office was quiet, decorated in soft tones meant to soothe. The ticking wall clock reminded Jamie of the cracked one in the hallway on Redwood Lane, the one that had opened the door to memory. He sat on the couch, eyes unfocused, as Dr. Harwood spoke gently from across the room. Often, when trauma occurs at a young age, the brain protects itself by closing off access to the experience. But that doesn't mean it's gone. The body remembers, and sometimes all it takes is one fragment, an image, a sound, a scent, to bring it all rushing back. Jamie nodded. It's already started. I just don't know how to make sense of it. Start where it hurts the most. Jamie closed his eyes. And then it came. A warm summer day. He was 4. His mother was packing snacks. His father was rushing them into the car, annoyed that they were late. Jamie remembered clinging to his toy airplane, not wanting to go. He didn't like long car rides. He remembered the stop, the rest area near the woods. He remembered his mother stepping out of the car, yelling into the phone, his father pacing nearby. And then, a stranger. Jamie tensed. There was a woman. I think I knew her. What did she do, Jamie? She told me to come with her, that my mom told her to take me to get ice cream. Dr. Harwood leaned forward. Do you remember how you felt? I was scared, but she smiled. She said everything would be okay, that my parents would meet us soon. And they didn't? Jamie shook his head. I don't think she ever intended to bring me back. Tears burned in his eyes. His breathing quickened. She wasn't a stranger, was she? He whispered. She was someone from my family, someone my parents didn't trust. Do you remember her name? Jamie clutched his knees, shaking. Margaret. Aunt Margaret. My father's sister. She had a fight with him years ago. I heard them arguing that day. I think she wanted to hurt him by taking me. Dr. Harwood paused, letting the moment settle. What happened after she took you? Jamie swallowed. We moved a lot, different cities, different names. She told me my parents had died, that I was lucky she found me. She said she was all I had left. He covered his face. I believed her. She manipulated you, Jamie. You were a child. You didn't have a choice. He nodded slowly. When I was 12, she died. A car accident. After that, I ended up in the system. Group homes, foster care. I didn't know who I was. I just knew I didn't belong anywhere. And when did you become Nick? At 16, I forged a new identity. I was tired of being passed around. Tired of people asking questions I couldn't answer. I built a life from nothing. He looked up, eyes hollow. And now I know who I really am. And I don't know what to do with that. Dr. Harwood's voice was steady. You let the truth live. You speak it. You tell your sister, your mother. You reclaim the name they whispered into the dark every night for 25 years. Jamie left the office feeling lighter, though his heart still carried the weight of 2 lives, the one stolen and the one he built to survive. That evening, Ava was waiting on the porch. She stood when she saw him. Well, I remember everything. She didn't press. She just opened her arms, and he stepped into them, like the boy he once was, and the man he had become. Inside, their mother was awake, weak but lucid. Jamie walked to her slowly, kneeling beside the couch. She stared at him, eyes wide. And then, trembling, she reached for his face. Jamie? She whispered, as if saying the name might shatter her. He nodded, his voice cracking. I'm home, Mom. And for the first time in a quarter century, she smiled without pain. The days that followed were full of quiet rediscovery. Jamie, no longer just a man trying to remember, was now a son, a brother, someone tethered to a past that had finally come home to him. And to Ava and their mother, he was no longer a ghost in a photograph, but a living presence filling the empty spaces left behind by years of grief. Their mother, weakened by illness but strengthened by joy, clung to him as if afraid he might disappear again. She spent hours just watching him, marveling at his face, brushing his hair back like she used to when he was little. Sometimes she'd cry, without saying a word. Other times she'd simply whisper, "My boy, my sweet boy." Ava watched from the doorway one afternoon, overcome with emotion. She and Jamie often stayed up late now, talking on the porch, sorting through childhood memories, real and imagined. He asked questions about their father, about Ava's life growing up, about the man he'd become in his absence. And Ava listened as Jamie slowly filled in the missing pages of their family's story. "I built everything on my own," he told her one night, staring out at the stars. "The business, the money, the house. But none of it ever felt like it belonged to me." "Because you didn't know where you came from," Ava said softly. Jamie nodded. "But now I do, and that changes everything." The next morning, Jamie returned to the hospital where he'd first opened his eyes to this new life. He met with the social worker to begin legally reclaiming his identity. There were forms to sign, DNA tests to confirm, old case files to reopen. But with each step, Jamie felt more whole. His story even made the local news. "Missing Boy Returns." After 25 years, read the headline, alongside a photo of Jamie standing beside Ava and their mother, smiling through tears. The phone rang nonstop for days. Friends, distant relatives, former neighbors. Some reached out with joy, others with guilt. But Jamie didn't blame them. "You can't hold people accountable for what they didn't know," he told Ava. "But you can hold on to what you have now." When his birth certificate was officially reissued, Ava baked a cake. They lit one candle, just like the photo of his 4th birthday. And as they sang, Jamie laughed. Not a hollow, polite laugh, but a real one. A free one. He donated most of his fortune anonymously to support missing children's programs. Then he moved out of the sterile mansion he once called home and into a modest house just a few blocks from Ava. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He wanted dinners with family. He wanted mornings where the silence wasn't heavy. He wanted to build something real from the ruins of what was lost. One sunny afternoon, Jamie pushed their mother in a wheelchair through the park. Ava walked beside them, her fingers laced through his. "I don't know how we ever made it without you," she said. Jamie smiled. "You didn't. You were the reason I found my way back." As the wind carried leaves across the path and children's laughter echoed in the distance, Ava looked up at her brother, the boy who vanished, the man who returned, and whispered, "We were never really whole without you." He looked back at her, eyes filled with peace. "And now?" "Now we are." And for the first time in a long, long time, they believed it. The end, and yet, the beginning of everything that matters. If you've made it this far, leave a comment with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell us what you thought. Thank you so much.